The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories.
Because it is not the government of the people any longer.
Circus ridiculous.
A new world order. A world where the rule of law governs the conduct of nations.
Most people do not understand the Illuminati.
It's all about control.
Conspiracy theories.
It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
A new world order.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
It's the Weekend Vigilante Show.
Well, hello, listeners, and welcome to the Weekend Vigilante Show. I am your host, Sheila Zilinsky, for April 24, 2014. Today, folks, we have a very powerful, hard-hitting lineup. My first guest really needs no introduction, but my new listeners, he's the Chuck Norris of trend forecasting. He's a founder of the Trends Research Institute, author of best-selling books such as my favorite, Trends 2000, and he is a highly respected and regarded for his uncanny track record of business, consumer, geopolitical, and economic trends before they come to pass. He's a 1-2 punch to the globalists, and he doesn't mince words. Gerald Celente, welcome to the program. There's so much to talk about here. I mean, where does a guy even start here? But, I'm reading the headlines. May looks to be like a really pivotal implementation of a watershed moment. And speaking of watershed moments, Gerald, back in December we saw the rules changing again when they said they're going to taper the QE, run the market up, yet we can see the markets can live without it. You have this IMF working paper with good old Carmen Reinhart saying debt sustainability can be achieved through a mix of austerity, forbearance and growth, and a tolerance for higher inflation is needed. I mean, what? Gerald, the shenanigans, the lies just never stop churning out from these people, and yet we've got people mindlessly muddling along, and they're not going to see this coming. The big question, Gerald, really is what happens when all this exported inflation comes home to roost here and everyone else is trading in currency that's not ours?
Well, it's difficult to say because everybody's doing it. I mean, you look what's going on in China. You look at their numbers, their Purchasing Managers Index. You look at their import-exports. You look at their GDP. Everything is down to terrible. And what are they doing? Well, they just announced they're going to be creating some more infrastructure programs. In other words, they're dumping money into the system. Yeah. You look at the ECB, they're dumping money into the system. You look at what's going on. Still, without the QE, I mean, they're still, pumping in, $45 billion a month? And when they come out with another 10 that they're supposed to drop off. But look what the real issue is. Interest rates are at all-time lows and for a very long time. So what is that doing? It's robbing all of us because in the old days there used to be a thing called savings accounts. And you put your money in the bank and you got a return on your interest that was above inflation. Now you're putting your money in the banks and you're getting 0.01% if you're lucky. But what the money's doing, Sheila, it's allowing the Ponzi scheme to keep going because all this cheap dough is allowing the hedge funds, the private equity groups, the investment banks, I love that term, investment banks, gamblers, high-stake gamblers, and they're borrowing money at almost nothing, and they're running the markets up. So as long as these interest rates stay low, you're going to continue to see the Ponzi scheme going because they're going to come up with a different label to keep the game on so that the private equity groups, the hedge funds, the venture capitalists, and the investment bankers could keep gambling. None of it is going to come down to the average person. In fact, the opposite is happening.
Well, in fact, they'll just come up with a new scheme for the stimulus. And, enter Janet good old Janet Bernanke 2.0 in a skirt. I mean, look at these headlines. All these, this is like a bad Twilight Zone episode. You've got these unscrupulous charlatans at the helm. They never stop. Who was it, Gerald, that accused the USA of living off their printing press? The Fed keeps churning out the money, and then again, like we just mentioned, Janet Yellen, I call her Mrs. Yes Lady, Keynesian as Bernanke 2.0 in a skirt, whatever you want to call her. All hell is breaking loose on the economic front here, Gerald. You've got Moscow just a few days ago saying that Russia's biggest state-controlled mega oil producers considering using euros as a settlement currency instead of the dollar. Russia's pretty much given us a finger and is saying, we're not going to play with the dollar here anymore. We're simply leaving the dollar system. I mean, if the Russians are able to do this, if China, India, and Brazil and others go along with it, then you pretty much have removed a lot of the international payment system from dependency on the dollar, producing a run on it. I mean, Gerald, has the death of the dollar officially begun here?
Yes and no. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, who I'm sure your audience knows, the former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Reagan, and also he's a contributor to the Trends Journal. And he and I were discussing this, and he said, I cannot believe that the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Korea, have not already come up with a reserve currency. And so that's what's really holding it back, because when you look at the yuan being traded, I mean, you're looking at less than 2% on the world markets that are being traded in yuan. And the euro's no great shake either. So you're going to go out of the dollar and into the euro? For what? And then because Draghi, the Goldman Sachs clown that's running the show over there, at the head of the central bank, he's saying that they're going to do anything they can as well to buy up crap and keep printing cheap dough. So where do you go, and what are the Chinese going to do? They're holding on to what? About $1.5 trillion worth of U.S. treasuries and bonds? So the dollar, although it should be going down and going out, then you have the yen. You got the madman over there, Abe, and with his Abenomics. Their stimulus, Sheila, by the way, in terms compared to the dollar, is 3 times the amount when you look at the GDP of Japan and what they've pumped in compared to what the Fed is doing.
Yeah.
Where do you go is where it ends up. And to me, that's why I still think gold is still a safe bet.
Absolutely. I mean, and then remember when Bernanke was asked if gold is dollar? I mean, this guy, I mean, you just have to shake your head. It's interesting because one of the headlines we saw, and I'm going to springboard into kind of a bigger infestation, we saw this standoff between the Bundy Ranch and the BLM, and that standoff, I think, really represented a visceral example, Gerald, of the growing discontent over an expanding federal government and a perfect storm illustration of an arbitrary and incompetent federal government running roughshod over its citizens, and really the steady erosion of personal wealth and liberty. I mean, really been the result of this Bundy land deal. But here's the bigger piece in this, and I think it's a systematic problem, and it's getting more absolutely virulent all the time. I mean, you see Harry Reid go traipsing off to China back in 2011. He comes back with this partnership with the Yan'an Energy Group, 100% owned by the Chinese government. I mean, this is a clever scheme to sell off below market value of valuable land, mineral, water rights to communist China so they can set up these large investment zones, economic zones, whatever you want to call them, with American-owned and controlled by communist China corporations, and they're accountable to the Chinese government. So just as we've seen foreign countries owning toll roads and ports throughout USA, they've turned our entire energy grid over to these foreign countries. I mean, there really appears to be a plan in place to establish Chinese ownership of everything, ports, towns, energy, solar, geothermal. And I remember back in the George W. Bush administration, the Chinese were prohibited from buying interest in ports, but of course, Obama reversed that. But we continue to borrow, like you just said, $1 trillion from the Chinese. And you've alluded to, this administration shows no end in sight of running deficits and borrowing from the Chinese. I mean, here's the question, Gerald. Has America completely been sold off to foreign nations here? I mean, is America going to have a huge fire sale like Greece where the vultures in control have destroyed everything and just offer up the scraps? I mean, what's left here?
Well, go back to Slick Willie Clinton. He's the guy that did the big sellout more than anybody else. He did what the Republicans couldn't pull off. With NAFTA, everybody forgot that one. And how about, the deregulation of the Glass-Steagall Act, the killing of the Federal Communications Act? Hey, you like eating those GMOs? Thanks, Slick Willie, for that. Not enough bovine growth hormone in your milk? This is the guy that really set the stage for this thing. He was the biggest sellout to the Chinese ever.
You bet.
And now it just continues to escalate. But it's bigger than that because when under Bush, when they came out with the line, too big to fail, right in front of everybody's face, that was the end of capitalism. In capitalism, there is no too big to fail. It's called the merger of state and corporate powers. It's called fascism. It's not about the foreigners. It's a fascist takeover by the multinationals.
You betcha.
Look what's going on. You want a job out of college? You could work for Staples. I got a better one. How about CVS? Why not Walgreens? A little competition there. How about Home Depot? Come on. How about Lowe's? They've killed every act that was put in place. Robinson-Patman Act, Sherman Antitrust Act, Clayton Antitrust Act, as I said, Stiegel Act.
Yeah.
Everything has been taken out of the hands of the people and given to the multinationals. When I was a kid, there were no hedge funds. There were no private equity groups. There were no venture capitalists. It was against the law. And the other Slimer, that nice guy that everybody loves, Jimmy Carter, the guy that got the ball rolling. He was the one that started the big deregulation under the banking industry that now allows banks to charge us worse than loan shark rates. That's Jimmy Carter. One sellout after another. And what do the people do? Don't raise your voice. Watch your language. Yeah, keep getting felt up as the TSA, molest your little children. This country there's not a man or woman in Congress.
That is a really good segue, Joe, because let's think about this. Congress has had a chance to deal with some of the worst decisions ever made. You mentioned Glass-Steagall, but I think about the approval of the TARP program at the end of the Bush administration, where they basically just handed over to Treasury first under Hank Paulson to basically put unlimited funds into bailing out virtually any type of financial derivative and asset. This international banking cartel can essentially shut down the economy. Oh, and Dodd-Frank, there's a beauty, an outright attack on our republic. And it's not just simply the removal of Glass-Steagall, but it's complete destruction. This means no jobs, starvation, no way out, and $1.3 trillion in derivative obligations. How does Congress willfully go along with the destruction of the country, Gerald?
I began my career at a graduate school going way back in the early 70s. I used to run political campaigns in Westchester County, which at that time was the richest county in the United States. And they sent me up to Albany, and I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate. And then I was in D.C. for several years as a chief government affairs specialist for the chemical industry, Roman Haas, Lonza, DuPont, Union Carbide. I got to see it on both sides. So when you talk about Congress, you're talking about the same people that you couldn't stand in high school and college that wanted to be class president and head of the student council. How could anybody look up to these people? All they are suck-ups, brown-nosers, glad-handers, overly ambitious. They'd sell your mother or mine to get anywhere they need to go. So when we're looking to Congress, we're looking at the same people we couldn't stand in high school and college. But there's one element worse. They're murderers and they're thieves.
Yes.
They start wars and kill millions of innocent people, and your kids too, and they steal your money. So my campaign slogan for 2016, why aren't you tired of voting for a lesser of two evils? How about Charles Manson in the White House? Let's call it what it is. Let's stop the charade.
Well, let's not break up the gang, the Bloods and the Crips here, though, Gerald.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm voting for a lesser of two. Okay, go for the whole deal, man. Why pretend? So that's where we're at. And the people, I look around, what people look like, what they dress like, what they eat, what they watch, what they think. I'll go to a party, and I think I'm around sane people. And then all of a sudden I'll hear, that Putin's just like a Hitler. And I'll look at the person and say, where'd you pick that line up from? Well, I said, do you know about Victoria Nuland? Well, I don't need to know about. And I'm talking about a guy that's the head of the journalism department for a major university.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of mainstream spin doctors, when you read these CNN, I call them clown news network headlines, and MSNBC. I mean, you must shake your head. There's no integrity in the media. The spin doctors are talking heads all over there. They're always saying, we're in recovery, nothing to see here, folks. Yet the dumbed down masses, and I think people even with the most virulent case of economic normalcy bias are looking around still saying something stinks in Denmark here. I mean, money inflation, price inflation, stagflation, this triple-headed beast here. Think of the hyperinflation that's built into the system, the magnitude of the debt. What, they just apply the full weight of the hyperinflation, take it out on the citizens? I mean, this really looks like the perfect storm for a global economic system or a one-world system, doesn't it?
Yes, and it is. Again, it goes back to the multinationals. It's a takeover going on in Ukraine. It's more than just the neocons. Again, that Victoria Nuland, the Assistant Secretary of State, giving a speech at the National Press Club on December 13th, 2013, and over her shoulder, there's a Chevron sign. And Chevron just cut a deal with Ukraine in November, weeks before she appeared there, for $10 billion to frack.
That's right.
And you got Shell down in Poland. Oh, they just sent our troops to Poland. And by the way, anybody to me, I'm over here in colonial Kingston, New York, first capital of New York State. The British burnt this place down in 1777. It has roots in the Revolution. Anybody that sanctions sending our troops, sending our money to other countries is a traitor to everything this country was founded upon by the founding fathers, the people that fought in the Revolutionary War. No foreign entanglements. And what I'm going to be doing, launching in the Trends Journal, which will be out next week, is an Occupy Peace movement, and it has a focus. No foreign entanglements, rebuild America, close down all the troops overseas, bring our money home, our people home, and focus on rebuilding this country. Because I don't see any other way out absent. There is no other way out. Because as long as we keep giving our money to the madmen and madwomen in power that are causing this destruction worldwide, it only keeps going down over here.
Gerald, do you think people fully understand the magnitude of destruction that's coming? I mean, the horror of this thing in action is nightmarish. I mean, what does mainstream look like when you have products on the shelves but Joe Lunchbox carrier can't afford it? When hyperinflation kicks in and you have this price inflation, you go to bed on a Friday night and Monday your gas is $15 per gallon, your bread is, $10, $12 a loaf. What does mainstream look like when this thing takes flight?
What happens is it doesn't take place in a straight line like that. And just as I mentioned to you about how easy it is to convince people that Russia is our enemy, that's what they're going to do. It's not going to be obvious. They'll blame it on something else and somebody else and somewhere else. And we all have to stand together to fight this action against the United States for those people that are trying to destroy us and ruining our way of life and stealing our freedom and liberty. You know what I'm talking about?
Does it disappoint you? I mean, you look at America now, and I don't think it's people say it was the last free country in the world. I think it's the first and only bastion, that democratic constitutional republic. You've lived in America. You're in America. You've placed your hand on your chest and you've sang the anthem. I mean, personally, when you look around and there's a war in America on every front, and this pilfering, pillaging, plundering of everything, you must just shake your head.
Well, it saddens me, but that's why I'm staying here. I could move anywhere, and I was down in Argentina and Uruguay and Chile looking around to leave. And I came back from Berlin in 2012, and I realized, after being to Berlin, I said, there's no grander city, and it was grander than Paris before it was bombed out. And everywhere you look, you see all new construction and old building, all new construction and old building. And I said, how could they let a two-bit freak like Hitler destroy their country? And I'm Italian. Italian-American. How can they let a two-bit freak like Mussolini destroy their country? And I came back, and there was a for sale sign on the 1750s Franz Rogan house right next to our offices. And I said, I'm not running away. This is my country. I'm sick of these. There's two-bit freaks everywhere. You can't run. But I have to tell you, the opportunity now has never been greater because the vacuum is so large. Everybody can see through it that's half awake, and they're not whacked out on prescription drugs. I mean, everybody sees the fraud that it is. So when you have an opening like this, it could be filled with greatness, or if nothing is done, it will be more destruction. So I'm going for the greatness. I think this is a wonderful time to have a new direction, and that's why I'm putting my money and my heart and mind where my mouth is.
Yeah, Big Pharma. I mean, I don't know if it's our GMO food, Gerald, our fluoridation and Big Pharma runoff in the water, the chemtrails. But let's face it here, we have got a dumbed-down public. They're walking around in this dystopic trance, shrugging their shoulders, singing Kumbaya while Rome burns around us, acquiescing to this thing. Yes, there's people awake, but, I mean, we're so dehumanized. We're being taught to love our servitude while they usurp our freedoms because it's safety over freedom, remember, Gerald. I mean, we're being really taught to love and embrace our servitude. I mean, it's full spectrum dominance over every area of our lives. It's sit down, shut up, you'll do what you're bloody well told, and don't you dare question your government or you're a terrorist. I mean, body scanners, citizen spies, sound cannons, drones, stage terror. There's Big Brother meets draconian police state here. And this extirpated Constitution, I mean, it's a soft kill culling here. And, I mean, it's only really the beginning of the nightmarish New World Order's eugenics plan, isn't it here, Gerald?
Well, again, that's who's in charge now. Here's the way I look at it. I say 80% of the people are exactly what you described. The zombies. They'll just do anything and eat anything and drink anything and follow anything. And then there are the 10% that are in power right now, the destroyers. And I believe there are 10% that are builders. And I believe if the 10% put their minds together, their hearts together, and their morals together, we could have a different direction. It doesn't have to go this way. It's not. Nothing takes a straight line, and it's happened before in history. I mean, after all, the Renaissance followed the Black Plague because people were hip enough to understand that my God, we're doing something wrong here. And what did they do? They went back to the past. Alle Romana e all'antica, in the manner of the Romans and the ancients, to describe the quality of their work. So what I'm saying, look, I realize that America's always been a country, of discrimination and inequality, and I mean, look what they did to the American Indians, my God. And but there was something else this country had that no other country did have. And there were elements of freedom and liberty, and it was the envy of the world because you had an opportunity to create your own future at one time. And so what I'm saying is I'm looking for a restoration of America. I'm not going to let these little boys and girls lead me. Why not take a different path? And that's what we're doing with the Occupy Peace movement. No foreign entanglements, rebuild America. And we're also trying to get it on every ballot in every state. And I'm also a believer in direct democracy, as they have in Switzerland.
Switzerland, yeah.
I mean, after all, it's the richest country in the world. The food's real good. Everybody has guns. They don't kill each other. There haven't been a war since 1850s. Say, well, we'll have mob rule. What do you think you got now? You got a gang of 535. They call themselves Republicans and Democrats, so you aptly mentioned Bloods and Crips. We got a mob ruling us now. Let us decide our future. As you well know, when the Too Big to Fail scheme came out, the people were against it 500-1, and they shoved it down our throats.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, I believe we could go in a new direction, and that's why I do what I do, and that's why I could tell you, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, who's a friend of mine. He does it for the same reason. We believe the vacuum is so great now. We're coming into a presidential election that nobody really cares about. I mean, who's it going to be? Will it be Rand Paul or Ted Cruz? Maybe Marco Rubio. How about, will it be Hillary or Biden? I mean, come on. How about, Mutt and Jeff?
Or Fred and Barney Flintstone, maybe.
Yeah.
Are you surprised, speaking of the gun grab, were you really surprised that last week Bloomberg announced his big $50 million gun grab here? I mean, it just never ends with the gun grab.
No, I'm not surprised at all. Again, by the way, how I address them, so, I'm all in favor of gun control. Let's start with the military. You guys got fat mouths out there, and you want to talk about gun control, let's start over there. And then after we start over there, Junior, then let's go to the militarized police. You got that in your head? And then after we finish with the Pentagon and then the militarized police, then come and talk to me.
Well, the litmus test, that should arrange that, isn't it? The new litmus test of leadership in the military is if they'll fire on U.S. citizens or not.
Well, these guys, I was at a thing the other day, a young boy, he hates school. I said, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to join the military. So that's it. There's no opportunity. People are either working for the military, they're working for the state, corrections officers, one after another, social workers. There's no jobs. Everything. I was talking to somebody that have a small radio station. They can't get any ads. You know why? Who are they going to get ads from? There are no businesses around. Staples isn't going to buy ads from them. Walmart's not going to buy ads from them. Macy's not going to buy ads from them. So what I'm saying, Sheila, is I'm going for a restoration of America. I believe in a renaissance. It happened before. History doesn't take a straight line. And I say if Obama can, Clinton can, Bush can, only speaking for myself, I can. And if you think their mother's better than yours, hey, fine.
The jig's up. This Great Depression playbooks exposed, the Ponzi schemes revealed. We're not even being cited anymore. We're being vetted as the source of all the bond fraud, the source of the Forex fraud, the source of the gold market fraud, the derivative fraud. Emerging markets are figuring out this fake fraudulent system. No one wants to do business with a crazy, out-of-control sociopathic group of lunatics running the U.S.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying. They don't have to run the country. It can change. And anyway, that's what I believe. You know that story, how on one island all the monkeys started doing the same thing, and then another island that was remote from it, they all started changing. The people are in control, and they don't know it. Again, you only need 10%, and we don't have to live like the way we're doing. We could rise to higher levels. That's what I believe. I
have a lot of people that did email it, just getting inundated in the chat room. One of the things people kind of wanted to get your take on, this World War III looming scenario, and they did want your take on what happened in Nevada with Clive and Bundy. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, World War III, if we keep letting these lunatics continue to do what they're doing, just as they're sending troops to Poland now and beefing up NATO around Russia, it could be the last war. I've been writing about this, and I've been writing about Cold War II now for, years. And if you pick up the Trends Journal back in January, we said that Ukraine was going to break into a civil war. Yeah. And the Bundy thing, it's significant in the point of what I'm saying. People having the courage to fight back. The details aren't important in the sense that they're screwing us in 100 different ways, and the politicians are criminals in so many other ways. The point of that's important to me is having the dignity and the courage to stand up and fight back.
We hope to get our country back because our founding fathers, let's face it, they'd be shooting by now.
Well, again, and that's the other thing. I don't support the troops. I don't support them at all. Bring them home. I don't want my money going on. I don't need a guy, I'm a tough Navy SEAL. Save it. I don't want to hear it.
Well, it's okay because we've got, how many thousands of Chinese and Russian troops on our soil, these foreign troops everywhere. I'm sure that'll be the nice playbook when everything rolls out.
Oh, that's the other thing, a self-sufficiency economy. You put back the trade barriers, you put them back up, you end NAFTA, a self-sufficient economy, we deal with each other. Buy, build, and live American. If you don't like it, then get to another country. This isn't the place for you. That's the way I see it.
Amen. Well, I appreciate you weighing in today. It's always a pleasure. My audience loves you. We salute you. You've been just absolutely out there in the trenches, and we thank you so much. We want you to come back and visit us soon. And if you could please give out your website for the folks listening too, Gerald.
Sure, trendsjournal.com, and the new one will be out on Monday. And, Sheila, we make it available to everyone that we can. We have a discount request page. We know people are having a hard time, but we want them to prepare for the future. And it's the only magazine in the world like it. It's 50 pages, full color, and no advertisements. And it's the only place to read history before.
You don't have a Walmart ad in there?
Well, I got 6 of them, actually.
Well, any final thoughts, Gerald?
Yeah, it's up to the people. And when people change, everything changes. It's the 100th monkey.